Hey guys, Smurf back again to talk about another ATP6 card. This time we have Hot Rod. Hot Rod was a character that Drew ended up getting to commission the art for since he won the tournament where that was the first prize, and Snowy did an amazing job on the art. Also, this character is one that I think is really cool. I've been messing with a ton of decks with it, brewing with, and I feel like a lot of people haven't really spent a lot of time exploring. I don't see a lot of lists with him on Teletran. So let's look over what Hot Rod does. So Hot Rod to start is a 7-star car who's melee. So what that means is currently none of the missions that we have in the game are compatible with him, but he is very good with specific missions, as you'll see later. So he's a 4-12-2 in both modes. So solid defense stat, reasonable attack stat, okay health. Importantly, damage can't be moved from enemies to him, so things like the Seekers or Horrible's flip won't be able to move damage to him, so he's got built-in bumpers. But when you flip him to alt mode, you get to move a damage from him to an enemy, so it gives Cars a way to indirectly deal damage to opponents, which we don't see very often. And that kind of gets exemplified more in his bot mode too, where when you flip to it, you get to scrap a card from your hand to deal a damage to him and deal a damage to an enemy. So it's just another way for cards to get indirect damage, which they haven't had again. It's also kind of a callback to his Wave 2 car, where he got to flip an alt mode or flip to bot mode from the graveyard to deal a damage. He also has a really cool ability that I think we might be seeing more of in the future, hopefully, which is while you have no cards in hand, he gets +2/+2. So just more benefits to not having cards in the hand. He kind of fuels that with his flip, where you have to scrap a card to do the mini Camion crash. But it's a really cool concept because it means cards like Mining Pick that don't really see play can be a +3 weapon, but if it's your last two cards in hand, it's a +5 weapon. He also just gets to become a 6-12-4, which is unheard of stats on a 7-star. So he's blocking and hitting hard in that. So overall, I think that this character has a lot to offer, both offensively and defensively. And I think that what makes this character so special is that he does something no one else really does. The first deck list I'm going to show off with him is going to be Energized Cars. It's kind of the most obvious one, I would say, for Titan 1, since that's the upcoming tournament. So to start with Energized Cars, we have Chrome Dome, we have Grax as his head, we have Night Racer, and we have Hot Rod himself. So Chrome Dome with Grax is just a really good energized enabler and payoff. And with Grax, you're looking at an 18 health character for 11 stars, which is ridiculous. He's also a specialist, so you can pick up things like Reverse Engineer. Night Racer is just kind of your best 5-star stat-wise, and she's a car. And she also lets us play the Stealth Mission stratagem to play the new card Dry Gulch. And then Hot Rod, as I mentioned, is just a 7-star car with a bunch of value added onto him. So one thing you'll notice with a lot of these decks that I'm going to show off is that they're actually more blue leaning, which we really don't see in cars. But because of Hot Rod's Hellbent ability, where you don't have cards in hand, you're going to be hitting hard despite being blue. So I think it's a really cool thing that these guys are going to last a lot longer than you'd expect from a traditional cards list while not really sacrificing too much on the damage front. So just quick overview of the deck list. We have your combat pumps in Leap into Battle. We have your car package of Start Your Engines Turbo Boosters to get your untaps. While the untaps aren't going to mean you're hitting like 15 damage like you would with a traditional cars deck sometimes, you're still going to be hitting consistently for like 8 to 12 if you have a weapon, which isn't a bad thing at all. You have System Reboot and Work Overtime to kind of rebuild your hand when you do need cards and you're not trying to focus on Hot Rod's ability. Reverse Engineer, Catch and Release, and Take No Prisoners are kind of your energized package. They'll turn on your energized as well as disrupt the opponent's game plan. So you got your Catch and Release is your removal in the deck. Take No Prisoners is your burn. We have a small secret action package since Night Racer does give tough while you have a secret action. We have 1 Sab Arms, 1 Downfall Protocol, even though it's not a blue in this deck. And then we have 3 Dry Gulch. We get to play 2 off a stealth mission, and then we had 1 star left over, so we get to play the third one. That card is so good. It's basically like a sabotage armaments with a stable cover attached, and a defensive formation, I believe it's called. So you get the defense, you remove pierce, and you remove a weapon. Like, it's so good. So making room for that star felt really important, especially since we were leaning blue and trying to go a little bit longer than your cards list normally would. Weapons, you have your Energon Axe, your Nobles and Scoundrels split since Chrome Dome's both, and then we have 1 of each. We have Fusion Bores to make sure we get guaranteed damage in, and then we have Thrumming Blades, which at worst is a Howling Howitzer, so 2 attack Pierce 1, which is never a bad thing. And at best it's 2 attack Pierce 3 as long as we don't flip a Black Pip, and we only play 4 Black Pips in the entire deck, so chances of not flipping a Black are pretty high. Then we have Bashing Shield, Sparring Gear, Guardian Shell as our armors. Just standard armors. The Sparring Gear, because we're base blue, but it's also an orange if we do want to flip it on attacks. As I mentioned before, we do have the turbo boosters, but then you also have absorption core and reflector cell, just being kind of your staple other utilities to play that are more defensive. I think this deck actually is a pretty good choice going into it because it's surviving a long time into a new metagame. It's hitting reasonably hard, and you get to play 3 Dry Gulch, which is going to be a really important card this event. Speaking of important cards, this deck also sideboards into Snapdragon extremely well, so by getting rid of 1 of your Dry Gulches and switching out Chrome Dome, you can bring in Snapdragon pretty easily, or if you switch out Night Racer, Hot Rod, and Stealth Mission, you can even go 2 tall with Chrome Dome if you need to, and keep a Dry Gulch, so lots of things to consider there. Actually, you keep 2 Dry Gulches if you do that, but lots of things to consider here. I think that this is a really cool control-y Cars deck that is probably well positioned, honestly, and a lot of people wouldn't think of. As I mentioned before, though, Hot Rod I think is good with mission stratagems as well, even though he can't play any just by default. The one I think he's the best with, and you'll see it in all 3 of the next deck lists I have, is going to be Sharpshooter. So, because of Hot Rod's flip to bot mode dealing a damage, you get an access to non-attack damage on a flip, which is really important for Sharpshooter decks because you don't need to reliably draw battle cards to get that damage. And a really cool thing is because he's melee, he won't get the stealth while untapped, so your other ranged characters will be protected and they have to hit your Hot Rod, which you'll have like 4 defense if you have no cards in hand. So forcing them into your biggest defense guy is going to be a really cool trick you can do with this. Also, you're amplifying his flip into a full Camion Crash. So I think it's worth trying him in Sharpshooter Shells because, like I said, you get the access to the flip to deal damage, and Sharpshooter decks are going to be pretty card hungry. Not like they don't look like they'll be card hungry, but because you want to constantly be dealing damage to the opponent, you aren't necessarily going to have the time to play card draw effects. The first Sharpshooter deck I have is going to be another Titan 1 deck list. It's going to be, I call it Gunslingers. So it plays Iron Fist, Hot Rod, and Minimus Ambus. So Minimus Ambus, or Ultra Magnus, is a character who probably got a lot of benefits from this new set. He was kind of underwhelming going into the previous formats, but with the new edition of Iron Fist, you get a cheaper Wrecker to play. So even though we didn't get and we got Wrecker's Orders, which is another just huge Wrecker's boom, so just those 2 additions to Wrecker strategies is a pretty big deal because it kind of puts their power level from like this good characters deck to actually having good cards to play with them. Because this is a Sharpshooter deck, I wanted to go with Iron Fist instead of Bulkhead because it got me Heroic Spotlight, and Iron Fist's alt mode or bot mode ability, does 2 damage to the defender when you flip white, blue, orange on attack. So with Sharpshooter, that's a 3 damage trigger to the defender. And with Heroic Spotlight, we get to play 2-0 to lose, which lets us do some cool tricks with Hot Rod, where we can give Hot Rod, or give a guy Bold 2/2, and then flip Hot Rod to alt mode to move a damage, and then flip him back to bot mode to deal another damage. So you just get this like chain of direct damage that you get to deal. Really good Wrecker card is Relentless Pursuit, so as long as they only have 1 character with the biggest stars, it'll get a bonus from Sharpshooter. Otherwise, it's still just like deal 1 to your guys to deal 2 to multiple enemies. So it's a really good card. Caming Crash obviously is really good. So a cool thing too with this deck is because of the way Ultra Magnus Armor works, our Camion Crashes, our Relentless Pursuits, our Take by Surprises, all that stuff won't actually deal a damage to us because the Magnus Armor reduces self damage as well. Which does mean that if your Magnus ever dies and you put the armor on Hot Rod, you can do his flip ability without dealing self damage as well. Another deck that just really easily sideboards into Snapdragon, you take out your 2 stratagems and bring in and Minimus and bring in your Snapdragon. Snapdragon, the big Nope Dragon, is really good into a lot of strategies people like playing, and I think he's just a character who a lot of people not necessarily have forgotten about, but haven't really played because they don't like playing the character, but he's a very good character still. So our sideboard kind of transforms us into a mercenary strategy. Deck's also 20-20 on blue-orange split for pips, so your flips on offense and defense can be fairly consistent. You got 6 doubles you get to play with Matrix, Leadership, and Rollout. And then Skillful Display because we have a Legend is another burn spell. So I think this deck is just a really cool take on like a bluish mixed wrecker strategy that focuses on the direct damage. And again, we're not really playing card draw effects, so we're going to get to that Hellbent state for Hot Rod a lot, and that just amplifies like the beefy stats that our characters are already going to have. The next deck list I have is actually going to be a classic deck list. I do think it's playable in T1, but classic is probably where this deck's going to be a lot better. So we have Hot Rod Surprise, is what I'm calling it. So it gets to actually play the Wave 2 Hot Rod that I mentioned earlier, where his flip to bot mode while he's in the KO does a damage to an enemy. It also plays Trax, Autobot Warrior, and Hot Rod Ardent Upstart. You can replace Trax with Chrome Dome if you really want to. I like Trax with Sharpshooter personally because his bot mode attack ability deals a damage to a non-plane, non-car. So when you have Sharpshooter active, you're dealing 2 to a non-plane, non-car, which can actually hit a lot of targets. Also because Hot Rod, the Wave 2 Hot Rod is going to be a car most of the time when he's in play, and your other Hot Rod is melee on both sides. When Trax flips to his alt mode, he can give +2 to either of those guys or +2 to himself, so you just get to maximize that ability. I've played Trax before in Titan 1, and I actually thought the character was solid. Like, he wasn't a bad character by any means. The one defense is kind of rough, but we can circumvent that by going a bit more blue, like with most of these lists. We also get to play our Heroic Spotlights for our Dry Gulches. So this one, like I said, it's also a Sharpshooter list. I have the Warpath in the sideboard if you want to also try him instead of the Autobot Hot Rod just to amplify your damage. But you do need to either play Autobot Hot Rod or Warpath between those two because that's your range character for a Sharpshooter. Battle cards, we have Leap into Battle as a pump, and then we have a small burn suite of One Shell Stand, One Shell Fall, Camion Crash, we have one Tripwire in the main, and we have End of the Road for opposing Legend decks. We have a small Energized package in here of 3 Catch and Release for removal and 3 Take No Prisoners, so this isn't a dedicated Energized strategy, but we can like shoehorn into it in the late game and get to the 3 for Take No Prisoners. And that's just getting an Orange Bolt is pretty good. Small Secret Action package. Sab Arms, despite because we're pretty multicolored, and the Dry Gulches, as I said before. And obviously your cars thing of the start your engines, turbo boosters, kind of default. Cool thing, because we have 2 melee characters with Track and Hot Rod, we get to play Energon Slingshot, which normally wouldn't be a very good card, but it's another way to turn our upgrade into direct damage for Sharpshooter. So it's a really cool interaction. This deck doesn't really get to utilize the Sharpshooter stealth because Autobot Hot Rod probably is dying first, but that's fine. He's mostly there, and why the deck is called Hot Rod Surprise is that once Sharpshooter is enabled, or to enable Sharpshooter, you can flip him from the KO and have just like the one direct damage that people won't expect, and then follow up with a harder hitting direct damage card from hand. So it's a good way to catch people off guard. We have mining pick in here as well because of hot rods, the new hot rods. Bot mode ability to have no cards in hand. You can put your 2 cards from your hand on top of your deck, get +2 on mining pick, and then you're swinging for 9 attack before flips. And assuming you put oranges on top, because we do play 14 orange pips, you can all of a sudden swing for 11 just there. Pretty solid interaction. Like I said, I think this is a classic deck more than anything, but if anyone wants to try it in T1, I'm pretty sure you could pick up a couple wins. But the last deck list I have, this is a spicy one that I actually think can potentially hold its own in Titan 1, which is crazy to think, and that is Hellbent Sharpshooter with Skytread of all characters. So Skytread has a really cool interaction with Hot Rod Ardent Upstart, and that is that when Skytread combines, you actually put your hand underneath the Skytread, so you go from having a hand to no hand, so it instantly turns on your ability to get the extra attack and defense. And he's ranged, so that means that he's going to have stealth while untapped, forcing people into your hot rod. Huffer is in here just as like the best, one of the better 5-star ranged characters. You could do Night Racer, but I like the fact that Huffer has sturdy and 4 base attack instead of 3. Since this is a blue deck, you do want to be utilizing that extra base attack when you can. Battle cards wise, we have Inspiring Leadership. It's there mostly just to filter our cards to find what we are looking for at each time. We have One Shell Stand, Marksmanship, Camion Crash, and Scouting Mission, as well as Take No Prisoners for a Burn Suite here. The One Shell Stands are really nice because Skytread's Revenge is that you get to combine. So if he's at lower health on like the tank, which is the one you want to be having die first because it has the least amount of health, so it'll basically combine you with more health remaining, you can kill your own tank with One Shell Stand to get an untap. Which that's the biggest part about Titan 1 and why I think this deck might actually stand a better chance in T1 than the previous list, even though it is still legal in Classic, is that you get that extra untap, and that's what Titan Masters allow you to do, that's what Legends allow you to do, so it's definitely something worth considering. Um, we have, like I said, a small Energized package, so you have 2 Reverse Engineer even though no one can pick it up. You have 3 Catch and Release for removal and 3 Take No Prisoners again. So you can turn on your Energized with these cards and then in the late game to get some value out of it. Upgrades, we have Armed Hovercraft just for more burn, 2 Axe, 2 Grenades, 3 Sturdy Javelins because we do have 3 ranged characters, and Hot Rod at least gets a primary laser out of the deal. Thrumming Blade, we only play 8 black pips, so we're not likely to flip one on attack, and if we do, it's not the worst. Again, it's still just a primary laser. Sometimes it's a Pierce 3 weapon, which makes it even better. 1 Force Field, just in case someone's hitting us really hard. And then 2 Bashing and 2 Guardians, just so we can have like other good armors. 2 Point Positions, so we can force attacks into who we want to, like a specific Skytread piece, for example. 2 Absorption Cores in here, just so we don't get burned out, because we do have a bit of a lower health total than most. And also, it's burn for Sharpshooter once it's turned on, and then Reflector Cell is just a good card. So, another interesting thing with the Skytread in this deck, as I said, he does have stealth, but he's also just good stats. Like, he's 6 attack, 18 health, 3 defense. So he's going to defend well innately. He will start with damage on him, but when he attacks, you get to, without looking, that's the big thing, you cannot look at the cards under Skytread. You get to pick one of those cards up from underneath him and move a damage, so you just get this other way of keeping him alive a little longer, and since Hot Rod moves damage and deals damage, you get this really cool like direct damage engine going. And overall, I think that gives this deck a lot more reach than people would expect at first. So yeah, that's what I have for you guys today, talking about the new Hot Rod and a couple deck lists for him. Let me know if there's any deck lists you're excited to try with him. If there's any synergies that I might have missed, let me know. And until next time, thanks.